Yo, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've been spoiled here by the level of this fearless drafting going on in First Strike right now. I think these drafts are actually some of the best adaptations I've seen from game to game. Everything just makes so much sense. And I wanted to cover this game in particular. Well, not only because, it's the final of the entire event, the first international event of the year, and I think it's just really good, a really good example of basically drafting to the level and style rather of both of these teams, and you can kind of see a really ideal scenario of how teams kind of lean into their pools and think on the fly, especially as these drafts kind of progress on. And I think that's one of the coolest things about this new format. So much so that if you've seen the recent announcement that they're actually just adapting this format for the rest of the competitive year, let's put it that way, the competitive season, I think it's really cool overall. And I want to highlight that a little bit with the picks and bans going on from this game. So we start from game one, of course. Spoiler alert: Hanwha Life win the series. Good for them. But I think two things here. Carmen Corp, not only are they a really solid team overall, if you think about their roster, putting the brand aside, you're like, you don't associate them with the level of success that they've been achieving. But if you think player for player, you got Kana, literally T1 Kana, by the way. This is one of the best players, best top laners, slipping under the radar. And you've got some of the goats from EU, Yike and Targamas, combined with the best of the young blood that the region has to offer in Vladi and Kalist. So it makes so much sense, right? And I do think they actually drafted really well according to how they like to play. And I think Hanwha also has a certain way of how they like to play, and through players like Zeka and classic like Zeus, Zeka, like come on, the Z's, and both teams are really adaptable. And I think it's like there was no draft where I was like, man, you guys just insta lose. It's very back and forth, and I love that. And they get really creative. So let's start with the most normal game. So Hanwha, they put a really high priority on the Rumble for Zeus. It makes a lot of sense because if you think about all the top laners in the pool in this sort of meta right now, if you think about it here, look at this. So a lot of these are really like, I'm not gonna even count these. These are like pinch picks, but more like a lot of them are blindable. But there's a sense of fear in sort of the top lane drafting meta right now, where there's no champ where you're just gonna slam and the top laner is gonna dominate, right? Even Jace, when you slam Jace, it's not really that big of a thing. It's more like you're hedging, and because Jace does have bad matchups, it's more about you're hedging in the scenarios where it's not ideal, and then he can switch over to a tank Jace, and that's why he's been so coveted in the meta now, right? A lot of players are willing to pick like Cassante or Mbessa or even things like Aurelia if they're crazy in order to counter it. And I want to point out some other things with this draft, right? So you can see the Poppy Insta ban coming out from Hanwha. So it clearly indicates that they're not willing to allow Hanwha, they're not willing to allow Carmen Corp to go into this backward style. And you can see the response from Carmen. They ban out both sides of the Varus Ezreal. This is a very interesting thing because usually teams are willing to trade it. Carmen are not willing to trade it at all, which does indicate to me that they just don't want to deal with that environment, if that makes sense. So basically, they just don't want to have that sort of scenario in the game where people have to trade poke, and that's the sort of like objective control and dynamic, right? They want it to be more volatile. They want to introduce chaos into the game, and that's basically the logic behind that there. What my caveat with this is that I think this is very expensive in terms of a ban perspective, right? Giving up 2 bans is very expensive. The alternative could have been just to let this play out in game 1, and then it's because of the fearless format, they could just let it be banned out for the rest of the series, right? So that wasn't an alternative take they could have went for. Or if they think that it's worth it, they can hold it for, I guess they could have held it for another like sort of timer. Maybe that was their plan, but I do think just letting it trade out in the beginning, it could be something possible. So when you look at in this draft in particular, Carmen Corp, they respond with something pretty standard. I would say they just go Maokai Jace. I would consider it like a non-answer, right? You pick the Jays to kind of neutralize the matchup. There's not too many champs that would do like that well, right? Because it's Rumble, so it makes a lot of sense. And then Hanwha basically they sign up for like they pre-pick Azir Wukong as an idea where, hey, we're gonna create that sort of like front to back sort of condition for you guys, and we're gonna make you try to respond to it. And the thing about that is that normally Wukong's more of a counter pick jungler, right? And he wouldn't normally be picked into a champ like Maokai, but I think on paper what Hanwha Life we're going for makes sense. This is probably the point where the only point in the entire series where they arguably make a draft plan that's like not 100% optimal. And this is not to knock them. I think it's still a great draft. It's really hard to play around a draft like this. But you can see a little bit of their pivot here, and this is likely off the back of the Kalist Misfortune R4. Very interesting take, right? So I think this is a very unique solution to a problem that is often presented in these Azir comps, right? MF is very unique in the sense that she still has access to this range, and this could be the reason why they banned Varus Ezreal game 1, so that they could bust out the MF in game 1, and then they could create a unique answer into the Azir so that they can cash in on this later. And I think that's really cool, by the way. I think that should be mentioned. So they go the Talia match, they go MF, and they actually have a lot of teamfight prowess, right? They can go the Recon lockdown, they can play around this Azir, right? Some mild issues, you can go ult for ult. If MF ults, Rumble can just ult the MF. So it puts a small limiter on the amount of plays they can make. But like overall, you can see that the lanes are sound, right? The team fighting is actually sound. And I really like the response from Karmine Corp. And that actually ends up giving them the game there, right? So game 2, right? They are on red side again. MF is now gone. They have to switch up the draft strategy, right? So now they completely nuke it, and Karmine are like, yo, I'm down to play that new strategy. I'm down to play that sort of poke strategy now. But we're going to get rid of the Vi. So essentially, this is because Hanwha did not ban Skarner on for their second ban, so which causes a Yone response from Karmine. Basically, this does mean because they're threatening the Skarner B1, they don't have enough bans anymore because they banned Vi first as well, by the way. So because they banned Vi first, and they realized that if they ban Varus Ezreal first, and then Hanwha goes for this opener, they're gonna be cooked, right? They're gonna have to mismatch ban, which is probably okay in some scenarios, but they didn't want to deal with it, which makes sense. So they get the Skarner opener, but they still puts them on a little bit of a back foot, right? They get the Skarner opener, and then they trade Varus Ezreal. And then the Ivern response is very common into the Skarner because you can, basically what the Skarner guarantees is a really strong jungler that can basically do it all, but he leaves himself exposed to certain things, right? So we've seen some cash out champions like Ivern and the Zyra are the two big ones that come to mind for me. Crazy players would go like Diana or like Lilia or even something like even crazier than that if they wanted to. But those are like or Nidalee even but these are the standard sort of response picks, right? So I would say this draft is a whole lot of nothing right now in terms of what's happening, and you can see that they're both basically just waiting for the other to kind of give in a little bit, right? But neither team does. And you can see, right? So Hanwha, they're like, all right, so we have great front to back, and we're just going to play our range through the Varus. I actually do think that the Aurora on B4 here could have been something else from Hanwha. This could have been easily another pick. Maybe they had some more aggressive intentions in mind because they saw, what did they see? They see Aatrox on 4, so I guess the overall mentality is that it's going to be a front-to-back battle, right? So maybe Hanwha does a very minor pivot. I don't really think that's the case because they do lock Braum with it. So I think there is an opportunity that they could have taken like Hui themselves. Maybe it's a denial pick even. They're scared of Aurora on 5, so they actually just take Aurora. That could have been the idea as well. So they take a slightly suboptimal pick themselves in order to prevent KC. And that's totally chill. But I don't think it's a bad draft by any means, right? You can see that on paper, KC do really outscale. And it's not really a bad draft at all. I believe in this game, it was more like a gameplay issue. There's just a couple of fights where it's really hard for KC to get a grasp. And I think that could be it. if there was a factor that causes KC to lose this game, it's definitely not the draft. So I think that's really good on them. Game 3, all right, they're back a little bit down, right? So they switch back. All right, no worries. The bans switch up again. So now Carmen, Sejuani B1. Because I believe Vi is still in, but Skarner's gone, Maokai's gone. And there's not too many priority picks left, right? Wukong's also gone. So you're not going to... What's left? You're like... If you're going to be able to blind jungle, this is probably the best one that's remaining outside of the Vi. So it makes a lot of sense. And Hanwha end up... At this point, it ends up being more about, spicing it up. Just getting picks that... winning lanes and getting something that works, essentially. And that's the funny part, right? So look at this. It's so scrappy. Carmen, they're like... When is the last time you've seen a top laner willingly just swallow their pride and go GP? I love this, right? And GP Sedge is actually a solid combo. So Carmen, again, great drafting overall. They go there's a pinch Akali ban here as well, probably in response to them thinking about this GP pick. So instead, we get the Jax pick, and then it clears the way for the GP. And I love this, right? So we get the Jhin response to the Ashe GP. It's like there's not too much you can do against Jax because the point is like the champion. It negates a lot of matchups, and there's only cheese stuff that would break it. But I like the GP here. And then Hanwha kind of revealed that they're kind of going a little bit more forward because Zeka just blinds Sylas on 3. So when I'm Hanwha blinding Sylas on 3, I'm looking for a lot of ultimates or matchups that would make my life really hard. And Karma Corp do a great job of that. They've come up with something that actually works really well. Could you argue that there's a better champion into the Sylas here? Maybe you can go Corki here or something. Maybe you could go. What else is there? There's not too much, but there's some answers that you could go for here. Victor is one of them, and I think it works pretty well. The set support is a great response from Hanwha, right? There's not many like Leona, Braum, Poppy, Rel, Rakan, all gone, right? So what can you do in this case? You could go Elise, but it's a little bit nerfed, right? Alistair's gone too, if I recall. So there's so many champs that are gone. I think the set's a really creative answer. So both sides, really, really creative drafting. I just want to point, that's the main point of this video, right? Last game. So now, KC are on the back foot. They're saying, screw it. Yeah, give Vi. Very crazy, by the way, because they switch it for an Italy ban. So they have intentions here. So they go Pantheon, Draven, Blind. And when you think about this, what's missing? Ashe is gone. Ezreal's gone. Kalista's still gone because of the ban. Varus is gone. Kai'Sa's gone. So it's very stylistic and very spicy. This is definitely something that's just because Kalista can. And this is probably where KC end up falling the most because especially when you pick Draven this early, you give Hanwha basically 5 picks in order to answer it. I'm counting it as 5 because when the Vi is a pinch pick that would be able to do it. But KC read into that. They want to make this the dynamic, so they respond pretty well, right? They go with the Xayah. I think Xayah Gragas is the bot lane matchup, which is cool. But overall, they've managed to come up with a comp that's pretty cohesive around it, and with very funny champs. We got the Pantheon, technically triple flex. I'm gonna make it mainly a double flex here, but you can kind of see the cooking that Karma Corp did. And I think, the point is to see, like, these are definitely very non-conventional champs to kind of bust out in a lot of these scenarios. Not necessarily because the champs themselves are unconventional, but the way they're slamming them and the way they're utilizing them. And I think that's the main idea here. And I wanted to kind of point out the beauty of that in this draft. So a bit of a yap here, but hopefully this makes sense to you guys. And I think I really look forward to seeing more drafts like this, like both leaning into the meta, but also kind of like identifying what the solutions are to the meta and how certain champions can kind of address that in their own unique way, and allowing your champion pools and styles to kind of lean into that. I think there's even more that we can do on top of this. So I do look forward to seeing like more Fearless in the future and for the rest of the year, especially. But as an example, we've been spoiled here. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And I'll catch you in the next one. So yeah.